I've spoken to over 140 heads of state since I've become president. You know what they'll all ask me?
Who is your daddy?
You know what they'll all ask me?
Do you understand the words that are coming out of my mouth?
You know what they'll all ask me?
English, motherfucker, do you speak it?
You know what they'll all ask me?
What would you say you do here?
Why is President Biden telling people still that the vaccinated cannot spread COVID?
Can you say more?
Yeah, in a local interview on Tuesday, he said, how about making sure you're vaccinated so you do not spread the disease to anybody else?
And so everybody talks about freedom and not to have a shot or have a test. Well, guess what? So how about patriotism? How about making sure that you're vaccinated so you do not spread the disease to anybody else? What about that? What's the big deal?
The CDC says people who get vaccine breakthrough infections can be contagious.
Well, I'll say this. I didn't hear this interview, so I would have to see it in its full context. What I know and what the president believes is that we have to listen to the science.
I'm glad you brought that up, because science is a liar sometimes.
Serious.
Who's the superhero that's going to speak against Joe Manchin? No. I want to know who's the real president of this country. Is it Joe Biden or Joe Manchin?
I'm sorry. I interrupted. I don't think the vice president can hear you. It's Simone. I'm so sorry, Charlamagne. We have to wrap.
She can hear me.
You can hear me? Can you hear me now?
Can you hear me, Madam Vice President?
So I'm sorry. We got to wrap.
Oh.
So I'm sorry to interrupt.
They're acting like they can't hear me. Y'all see that?
I can hear you.
Oh, so who's the
I
real?
can hear you.
So who's the real president of this country? Is it Joe Manchin or Joe Biden, Madam Vice President?
Come on, Charlamagne.
Come
on. It's Joe Biden.
I can't tell sometimes.
No. It's Joe Biden, and don't start talking like a Republican about asking whether or not he's president.
Do you think Joe Manchin is a problem?
It's Joe Biden, and I'm Vice President, and my name is Kamala Harris.
Damn!
Trump advisor Roger Stone, who draws his glasses on with a Sharpie, refused to cooperate with the committee investigating the January 6th attacks, though Stone said he would be open to sitting in the corner watching the committee take turns on his wife.
Now that's fucked up.
Because democracy basically means government by the people, of the people, for the people. But the people are retarded.
Then strangled them, and finally dismembered their bodies.
Right.
And homelessness and all that.
And now, the voice you've been waiting for.
There is a secret zone at the center of the world, and its sound is like razors through flesh. I'm here to turn up the volume.
Let's start with some local news. Down here in Florida this past week, Governor DeSantis signed into law a bill called the Stop Woke Act, something to help enforce the ban on CRT in public schools.
You can have certain things, and sometimes the school districts don't always follow it. And so we are going to be including in this legislation giving parents a private right of action to be able to enforce the prohibition on CRT, and they get to recover attorney's fees when they prevail, which is very important. And yes, there will be a fortified ability for the State Department of Education to hold people accountable, but honestly, the parents know best what's going on, and they're in the best position to be able to do it. And here's the thing. A lot of times these people will fear lawsuits more than a fine from the State Department of Education, because when you do a lawsuit, you get discovery and you're subject to that. And when they say they're not doing CRT and then you have all this information showing that they are doing it, it really is an uncomfortable position for them. So I think that gives parents the ability to go in and ensure that our state standards are being followed. And I think it's something that needs to be done.
Now, for some reason, this has caused a big uproar in all different kinds of media and intellectual circles, with some people even calling this codifying white supremacy. This was one of the big issues that came to light during the Virginia gubernatorial race, and it's funny because everybody was saying that this CRT wasn't even being taught in schools. And, you know, months ago, Florida had banned the teaching of CRT in schools, and everybody acted like, oh, you're so stupid, it's not even being taught, ha ha.
You dumb bastard.
My question is, why is an issue like critical race theory being taught in schools? It's not. But people are out of their minds. Wouldn't it just be easier if everybody said, okay, we weren't teaching it and we will continue not to teach it?
Yeah. Well, but they want to teach it.
Nobody wants to teach critical race theory. It's college level conversation.
It's actually law school.
That's law school stuff. It's not a thing.
So now they've passed another law saying that if a parent gets wind that CRT is being taught, that they can sue. And when they sue, they'll be able to look at the evidence. And if you are teaching CRT, it'll be right there, and it'll prove that when you say you're not teaching it, you're a fucking liar. Because, I mean, if it is true that it's not being taught in schools, then who cares? Who cares what law they passed against doing something that you're not doing anyway? It shouldn't be a problem, right? Oh, but now that somebody gave people a framework to prove that it is being taught, now it's a fucking problem.
How dare you!
There's also been a lot of news about the tornadoes that ripped through the country's midsection this week. And it's being used as the new big push for doing something about climate change, because of course this is, you know, all caused because of our CO2 and methane emissions. And I understand that this is a really divisive topic that people get very emotional about and everything, but what pisses me off is when you're talking to somebody about climate change and you start to mention things about weather modification and geoengineering, and they act like that's not an established fucking fact that it exists. And you'll tell them, listen, this kind of stuff has been around since the 60s. You try to show them Project Popeye, and they just don't want to hear it. Or the fucking former director of the CIA talking about these technologies.
Another example is the array of technologies, often referred to collectively as geoengineering, that potentially could help reverse the warming effects of global climate change. One that has gained my personal attention is stratospheric aerosol injection, or SAI.
I mean, there's even patents on controlling tornadoes and hurricanes. But no, this shit is all made up, and, you know, we need to establish a carbon tax to do something about the droughts in the Midwest. It's not like there's any way to seed clouds and make it rain, for fuck's sake. Am I saying that the tornadoes that just happened got caused by this technology? No, I really have no way of knowing that. But I'm saying it is possible. And I'm also saying that unless we're willing to inject the knowledge of these technologies, hell, let's just start with the ones that we know and can prove fucking exist. Unless we're willing to discuss those things, we're not really having a discussion about anything. I mean, shit, look at the state of Texas. Their division of licensing actually issues permits and licenses for people to do weather modification. Why, if it doesn't exist? If this is all just, you know, conspiracy theory bullshit, why would there be a license to do this kind of thing? But the people in the population, the little people, are too busy and too lazy to want to take a fine look at a highly nuanced topic like this. And the people that are in charge of framing the discussions on this topic, well, they have something to gain from us just looking at curbing carbon emissions, because the more action we take on that, the more power and control they have over us. And speaking of power and control, they sure are doing their best to hype up this Omicron surge. They seem to almost gleefully report the first death of Omicron coming in the UK, of course. They didn't mention anything about how old this person was or what kind of other comorbidities they might have had, so I'd be willing to guess it's not going to be a young, healthy person. And Moderna just announced that getting a booster of their vaccine really helps you to not catch this Omicron variant, but for some reason they're still going to be developing a new Omicron-specific vaccine. Does that seem illogical and redundant? Well, just because you don't understand the science enough, I guess. And neither do I, for that matter. It seems kind of counterintuitive to create a whole new vaccine for a different variant when you've already got one that supposedly works so well. And in completely unrelated news, a lot of professional soccer players have been suffering from what health officials are calling a major coincidence. That's all just a big coincidence that hundreds of players have been suffering cardiac events and some having heart attacks right there on the pitch. If only there were some way to narrow down what it is that could possibly be causing this. This has never happened before. So is there anything that's changed, anything at all in the past year that could be causing professional football players at the height of physical health to be dropping like flies? I wonder.
God, these are increasingly rare. Thank God this is incredibly rare, right? Oh no, yet again, coincidence strikes. We've got to do something about these coincidences striking their people over and over again. Nothing about this is normal. Nothing about this is precedented. This is completely unique and unexplained so far by the authorities. Obviously explained if you... I'll show you what they're saying is causing the rash of cardiac illnesses around the world.
And in financial news, I hope everybody asked Santa for some inflation, because that's what you're going to get. What was initially disregarded, and they claimed, oh, there's not really going to be any meaningful inflation. Then they said, oh, well, it's going to be transitory. And now they're starting to say, well, you know, it might be with us for some time. Of course, this is just because of the pandemic is all. But what would happen if this no big deal inflation turned into hyperinflation? It's certainly not unprecedented. Countries get into trouble financially and they try to print their way out of it, and they just pump up the money supply, and then boom. It happened 100 years ago in Germany. It happened about 20 years ago in Zimbabwe. And people claim that it could not happen here because we are the reserve currency. And it sure looks like they're putting that theory to the test. The amount of money in the money supply in US dollars, it inched up little by little over time, and then following the financial crisis in 2008, it started shooting up in a way that panicked a lot of people, and they said this is a really bad idea. And then, when the pandemic started, that shit went almost straight up. So if we do start to see hyperinflation and a collapse of the currency that happens to be the world reserve currency, you know what's going to happen next?
You're gonna see some serious shit.
And I'm sure they'll try to pin it on the koof or maybe on those pesky anti-vaxxers. Maybe they'll blame it on Russians. But the truth is, this has been building for years, and the stage is set. Sláinte.
In this world is my thoughts and my words, and I don't break them for no one. You understand? So say good night. So say good night to the bad guy. So say good night. So say good night to the bad guy. So say good night. So say good night to the bad guy. So say good night. So say good night to the bad guy. Come on. Come on. bad guy. I told you. Don't fuck with me. 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 You stupid fuck. Look at you now. Look at you now.